Howdy folks, hope you're all having a great weekend. Welcome back to Casual Saturday, and this week we're taking a look at a brand new game that's out on the 14th of September on Steam. It's called Victory at Sea Pacific. And just so we're all absolutely clear, this is not a sponsored video. Evil Twin Artworks, the game developers, haven't given me anything other than access to the game prior to release so I could have a go and hopefully do a video on it. And I'm doing a video on it simply because I think it's a very good game and I think you lot may get a kick out of it. So, what's this all about? Well, as the title would suggest, it's about victory at sea in the Pacific, specifically during World War II. There are 3 campaigns that you can play: American, Japanese or British, although during pre-release only the American campaign was available. So the American campaign is what we're going to be showing you. The game begins and dumps you into tutorial. The Japanese had just attacked Pearl Harbor, and you were in command of the USS Litchfield, which is an old World War I 4-stacker destroyer. I have to admit, I'm not 100% sure exactly what class of destroyer this is, a Samson or a Clemson, something like that. But it's one of the old World War I destroyers of the specific types that were given to Britain as part of the Destroyers for Bases deal prior to this point during World War II. To begin with, all the game's really doing is making sure you know how to use the camera and actually get the ship moving. All fairly basic stuff. Very quickly, of course, you graduate onto learning how to use the weapons, and here's a stationary cargo ship that's been provided for just this purpose. You are armed with some pretty bad 3-inch or 102mm guns, but you also have torpedoes. So we're going to light up the SS Rebecca Lukens here with the 102mm guns. We've scored a hit. Fantastic. Let's have a go with the torpedoes. You're probably already realising that this is not an arcade game like World of Warships. You don't actually have direct control over the ship or ships under your command. You can issue orders to those ships. You can tell them where to go, how quickly to go there, and what to do when they get there. But you don't actually directly control the ship. You can directly control some of the systems on the ship, such as, for example, firing torpedoes. You can choose the exact width of the torpedo spread that you're going to fire, and you do have to manually aim the torpedoes yourself. Unlike in World of Warships, you don't get that target lead indicator, so hitting something with torpedoes in this game can actually be quite tricky. Well, anyway, the USS Litchfield's shakedown cruise is about to be interrupted by those pesky Japanese who have just launched an all-out surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. And by a remarkable coincidence, we are actually in Pearl Harbor right now. Well, we're not in the harbour, but, you know, we're in Hawaii. We're in a position to help do something about it. The USS Enterprise is in the vicinity, and Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet is understandably anxious that it doesn't become a victim of the Japanese attack as well, and so we've been ordered to proceed to the Enterprise's location and help defend her from any of the hostiles that may still be in the area. Don't forget, the Japanese did not just attack Pearl Harbor with carrier-launched aircraft. There were also mini-submarines taking part in the attack, although unsuccessfully. So what the game is going to show us how to do now is how to control more than one ship at the same time, and to do that we're going to have to form them all into the same squadron. At the moment we have 2 squadrons: Baker Squadron, consisting of the USS Enterprise, and the destroyer leader, the USS Balch. Alpha Squadron, which consisted of the USS Litchfield. We've dragged the Litchfield into the same squadron as the Balch and the Enterprise. And now we can control all 3 of them by issuing orders to the squadron as a whole. By default, this new squadron is now in a circle formation, which is the preferred formation if you have an aircraft carrier involved, because the carrier will sit at the centre of the formation and the escorts will encircle it, which is pretty much exactly what you want when you're escorting an aircraft carrier. So while the ships are busy getting into formation, we're going to be using the Enterprise to send some aircraft out in order to scout for any further Japanese hostiles in the immediate area. To do this, we're going to select a bomber flight. This flight consists of 3 Douglas Dauntless dive bombers. However, you cannot just launch them straight away. The carrier has to be sailing into the wind. If you have a look at the carrier itself, it will show you which direction the carrier needs to be going in order to successfully launch and recover aircraft. You don't really have to worry about micromanaging on this kind of level. Once you've issued a flight order, the carrier and the squadron escorting it will perform the correct manoeuvre in order to get the ship pointing into the wind so it can actually conduct flight operations. But the indicator is there just so you get some kind of idea about which way the squadron is going to end up facing. And the dive bombers are away. Now, in the aftermath of the Pearl Harbor attack, there were all kinds of confused sighting reports of all manner of different types of Japanese surface combatants and submarines spotted in the waters around Hawaii. And so we're going to be using this single flight of Douglas Dormer's dive bombers to scout out one of the locations of these sighting reports. What you're about to see here is not entirely 100% historically accurate. We're going to engage and hopefully destroy the Japanese destroyer, the Hamikaze, which I'm reasonably sure, even if it was involved in the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, definitely never got this close to Hawaii. But hey, what the hell? We have to bomb something. It's all part of the tutorial. And the Hamikaze will do. Once again, you don't directly control the squadron, although you can set the altitude from which they're going to begin their dive bombing attack, but otherwise you pretty much just select the target and leave the pilots to sort it out themselves. Any second now, bombs away, dive bombs peel off, and that's an ex-Japanese destroyer. Right, mission accomplished. Well, what's next? How about a spot of anti-submarine warfare? While we're busy recovering the dive bombers to the flight deck of the Enterprise, the USS Litchfield has picked up a sonar contact, and it is uncomfortably close to the Enterprise, so we should probably do something about that. The USS Litchfield, furiously pinging away with its sonar, rapidly. I know it doesn't look rapidly, but, you know, just go with it, okay? Closes in on the scene of the sonar contact, and we find ourselves the I-20, Japanese submersible. So we're going to close in for a depth charge attack, which pretty much means we have to basically pass right over the top of the contact. And yep, it's now in the arc of the depth charge launcher, and we've just bagged ourselves a Japanese submarine. Jolly good show, chaps. Splice the main brace. Oh wait, that's the Royal Navy. The US Navy's dry. Oh, what the hell. Close enough for government work. Anyway, so far, we're not quite done with the tutorial. You see, we've learned how to control a single ship, how to control a small squadron of ships, conduct carrier flight deck operations, and anti-submarine warfare. But Victory at Sea Pacific is not going to have you just controlling small squadrons of ships. As the title of the game would suggest, you are given command of the entire US Navy Pacific Fleet. And your objective is to win the war. Yeah. In order to do that, we're going to have to learn about fleets. At the moment, we have 3 of them, organised in 3 different task forces. We've got one at Hawaii, which consists of the Enterprise, the Salt Lake City, the Chester, the Northampton, and a bunch of destroyer escorts. But for the purposes of continuing this tutorial, we're going to take command of Task Force 12 in the North Pacific, which consists of the carrier, the USS Lexington, the armoured cruiser, the USS Chicago, the cruiser USS Portland, and the destroyer leader, the USS Porter. And we're going to be using aircraft from the Lexington to scout out to the north of Hawaii to try to locate the Japanese task force that conducted the Pearl Harbor attack. While we're doing that, however, our third task force, Task Force 3, has encountered Japanese ships to the west of Johnston Island. And since we are now at war with the Empire of Japan, it would seem rude to not shoot at them. Once one of your task forces makes contact with an enemy force, you're given a pre-battle deployment phase where you can pick the formation that you want your ships to adopt. Since we don't have to worry about escorting any kind of aircraft carrier here, we just have the USS Indianapolis and a couple of destroyers, we're going to engage this Japanese flotilla in a line formation. And I'm not planning on doing anything fancy here, we're just going to steam towards them and start shooting. We significantly outgun this Japanese flotilla. Hell, even if we just had the USS Indianapolis alone, and not its escorting destroyers, we would significantly outgun this Japanese flotilla. The Indianapolis is a heavy cruiser with 203mm or 8-inch guns, and easily outranges anything that these Japanese light cruiser and destroyers can throw back at us. And this does pretty much go exactly as you would expect. With a heavy cruiser opening up and a light cruiser like the Tenryu, there's only really ever going to be one outcome. And yeah, that pretty much went almost exactly as you'd expect. Now it's the turn of the 2 destroyer escorts. Tanakaze next, I think. Oh yeah, that's going to leave a mark. That ship is now dead in the water. Ships will conduct repairs once damaged, but they take a while, and I don't think with an Indianapolis shooting at you, poor old Tanakaze here is what is referred to in naval circles as proper screwed. And now it's the turn of her surviving sister ship. This is the Yurikaze, unless I'm very much mistaken, and it's possible that I am. It's a Minakaze class destroyer. Although, if the gunnery crew on board the USS Indianapolis have anything to say about it, it's going to be spending the rest of World War II as an exotic diving location for scuba divers. So, that's a win for the good old US of A. It wasn't much of a win, it was just 2 destroyers and a light cruiser, but, well, we just got the shit kicked out of us at Pearl Harbor. We needed a win, any win, and this one will do. Still not quite done with the tutorial, however. So far, we've been reacting to Japanese attacks. It's time we went on the offensive. In order to do that, we're going to need some scouting. And in order to do that, we're going to be given command of another task force, Task Force 5, which consists of a single submarine, the USS Drum. This was a real World War II submarine. In fact, it still exists today. It's a museum ship on display in Mobile, Alabama. Today, we're using the USS Drum to scout out Japanese positions on Makin Atoll, because we're going to be raiding Makin Atoll with a surface action group later on. The Drum's actual first World War II patrol was slightly more eventful. She sank the Japanese seaplane tender, the Mizuho, and then got depth charged for 16 hours. But she got away, sank another 3 merchant ships, and returned to Pearl Harbor with a fairly successful first war patrol under her belt. Luckily for the crew of the USS Drum here in Victory at Sea Pacific, we do have something slightly more interesting for them to do than take photographs of the Japanese playing cards. There's a resupply convoy en route to Makin Atoll, and we're going to intercept it with the USS Drum. World War II submarines weren't really submarines in the sense that we understand today. They were more submersibles. I mean, they could submerge, obviously, but these were not like modern submarines that can and do stay submerged for months at a time. A World War II era submarine would be in serious trouble if it had to stay under for longer than a day. The build-up of CO2 in the atmosphere on board would kill everybody. Plus there's also the fact that World War II era submersibles were incredibly slow while they were submerged, so what would often happen would be that World War II era submersibles would spot a convoy, they would shadow it, and then as soon as it was safe to do so, usually under the cover of darkness, they would come to the surface, put on full speed, race ahead of the convoy to an ambush position, then submerge and wait to attack the convoy as it passed. However, in this case, since this is an unarmed convoy of 2 ships, we can attack them on the surface using the USS Drum's 3-inch deck gun. We do need to be careful, however, because a 3-inch gun is not particularly powerful, and it could take a while to sink this oil tanker and cargo ship. And we're not that far from Makin Atoll and Tarawa, which both have Japanese garrisons and airstrips, so we need to keep an eye open for enemy aircraft, and be ready to submerge if we spot any. Plugging away at this oil tanker with a poxy little 3-inch gun is getting kind of boring, however, and since we are in torpedo range, what the hell? Let's stick a couple of fish into her. That ought to light her up good and proper. Plus, it's a nice simple down-the-throat shot. The oil tanker is heading straight towards me. I don't need to make adjustments for the course of the target. So we're going to sink this one with torpedoes, and then turn the 3-inch gun on the smaller and more vulnerable 3-inch artillery fire cargo ship. I'd prefer not to have to use torpedoes on this thing because, well, you don't carry an unlimited supply of torpedoes. Okay, we got it. So, we've conducted scouting operations against the Japanese garrison on Makin Atoll, and we've starved them of supplies by sinking their resupply convoy. Now it's time to conduct a raid. And to do this, we've been given command of another task force, Task Force 17, which consists of the carrier, the USS Yorktown, and the escorting cruiser, the USS Louisville, along with the destroyer, the USS Phelps. Now, you may have noticed that as we complete each phase of this tutorial, we're being awarded war bonds, and this is the currency that the game uses. You use war bonds to order the construction of new ships, to expand the facilities at your existing bases, and to build bases on islands that you have successfully captured from the Japanese. And of course the Japanese aren't sitting still while you're doing all of this. They're continuing their conquest of the Central and Western Pacific. But we're going to make them pay for it, at least a little, because Task Force 17 is now in position to launch attacks at the Japanese garrison on Makin Atoll. So, using everything that we've learned from the tutorial so far, we're going to be conducting a raid on the Japanese garrison at Makin Atoll, and we're going to be using the dive bombers from the USS Yorktown in order to do it, escorted by the cruiser, the USS Louisville, and the destroyer, the USS Phelps. If we wanted to, we could close in with the Phelps and the Louisville and do naval gunfire support. But, as was revealed by the reconnaissance conducted by the USS Drum, the island is extensively defended by 6-inch naval gun batteries. So if we don't have to put the surface ships at risk, well, don't put the surface ships at risk. At least not until the aircraft have neutralised the defences. It may be a cold-hearted and mercenary way of looking at it, but, well, if you lose a Douglas Devastator dive bomber, you've lost 1 aircraft and 2 aircrew. And you may even be able to recover the aircrew. A heavy cruiser like the USS Louisville is a damn sight more expensive and difficult to replace. Anyway, raid complete, so we're going to recover Task Force 17 to Johnson Island in order to repair and resupply. At the top of the screen you can see a bar which indicates the current overall state of the war in the Pacific. At the moment, things appear to be in our favour, but the Japanese conquests are only starting. Underneath that you can see a whole bunch of question marks organised into blocks. This is your experience bar. As you fill each block, new ship designs are going to become available for construction in your ports. And you will pay for those new ship designs and the expansion and construction of new ports with the war bonds that you may have noticed were being awarded as we complete each phase of the tutorials. But the tutorial is not going to last forever, so we're going to need another source of war bonds if we're going to stand any kind of chance of winning this war. War bonds are generated by your ports. So the more ports that you have, the more war bonds you're going to generate and the bigger a fleet you're going to be able to build. And at the moment we don't have a huge number of ports. Let's have a look and see what we actually have. Most of the ports that you control at the very beginning of the game have very limited facilities. Only 4 of them have dockyards: Pearl Harbor, Puget Sound, Mare Island and San Diego. So we're going to go to the port of San Diego and we're going to build ourselves a new destroyer. It's going to take 13 days to complete, which is pretty good when you think about it. The Gridley class, by the way, World of Warships fans, it's based on the design of the Mayhan. The Gridleys were armed with 4 127mm guns, but they had 16 21-inch torpedoes. They were also pretty quick. One of them, the USS Maury, set a speed record for US Navy destroyers during her sea trials when she managed to attain a speed in excess of 42 knots. So we're going to go ahead and build ourselves a Gridley. Now if we wanted to, we could order some additional upgrades, which would cost extra war bombs, but we could give her an advanced radar and increase her anti-submarine warfare capabilities. But this will do for the moment. So we're going to order construction of this Gridley, which will be complete in 13 days. Meanwhile, the balance of power in the Pacific, represented by the green and red bar at the top of the screen, seems to be getting more red and less green with every passing minute as the Japanese continue their march across the Pacific. What next for the tutorial? Well, that's pretty much it. The game will continue suggesting things that you might like to do, like for example conduct a raid on Tarawa, which will reward you with additional war bonds. But from here on in, you are in sole command of the US Navy's Pacific Fleet with but one objective: defeat the Empire of Japan. That is a seriously big ocean, and what happens next is all up to you. Singapore has fallen, Hong Kong has fallen, the Japanese have occupied the East Indies, they're advancing into New Guinea from where they'll be poised to strike directly at Australia. Darwin is already in range of Japanese air bases. At the same time, they're already beginning a campaign leapfrogging across the islands in the Aleutian chain up in the North Pacific from where they'll be poised to strike at Alaska. And Alaska, along with Texas, is the source of most of your oil, so you can't really afford to leave the Aleutians undefended. As if that wasn't bad enough, they already have substantial island strongholds in the Central Pacific. They control Wake Island, which is only a stone's throw away from Midway, and if they take Midway, they're within striking range of Pearl Harbor. Now historically, the US Navy won a victory in the Battle of the Coral Sea, which was instrumental in preventing the capture and occupation of New Guinea. specifically Port Moresby. And that meant that the Japanese had to abandon their plans to invade and conquer Australia. The US Navy then went on the offensive in the Solomons, specifically the 6-month campaign to conquer and neutralise the Japanese garrison on the island of Guadalcanal. And from that moment on, the US Navy pretty much had the Japanese on the back foot. But just because that's what happened in reality doesn't mean it's going to work that way in Victory at Sea Pacific, because you are in charge. You're the one making the decisions. So good luck with that. Nobody said it was going to be easy. So, if you think you could have done a better job than Nimitz, Halsey and Spruance, or indeed if you're playing the Japanese campaign, Yamamoto, Ozawa and Kurita, now's your chance to put your money where your mouth is. All I can say is, I sincerely hope the Australians don't hold grudges. Because, it'll be fine, we've still got New Zealand. This is fine. Anyway, Victory at Sea Pacific, available on Steam on the 14th of September. Hope you enjoyed today's video, have a great weekend, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.